Also, I want to acknowledge and welcome all the folks who are joining us remotely. Welcome, and we do hope to see you at future meetings when it's good to all be together in place. And looking around the room, we have some amazing people here. We have a great local movement. You represent our movement ecosystem. So let's think of our space here as representing a part of our movement ecosystem, and you all know who else is in our space and what we can all bring together. So let's ask what we can do together. I think that's the point of our community action dialogues, and we're just really excited that this one we can start off and really set a high bar for these sessions. And we spent a week with Leilani, and she's looked around our city a little bit, met some folks in different parts of our ecosystem here. And I wanted to start off by inviting Leilani to share some observations about what you see here and how our movement should be thinking about our situation here. But what do you think are some of the resources or possibilities that you see from where you sit and doing work at the internet, at the global level, and with the shift, trying to build a global housing justice movement? So I'll ask you to start off, and then following Leilani, I'll invite all of our panelists who are, again, great leaders in our housing justice movement to just introduce yourselves and your organizations, and then bouncing off some of the things that Leilani lifts up. Hopefully, Leilani will suggest some projects that we might do that take advantage of the resources in this global movement. And you might offer some thoughts about how your work in your organization might contribute to what we can do together. So if everybody thinks about that, what can we do together? And then think about where you sit, who you connect with, how can you mobilize some skills and resources into that space, or what can we learn from the folks up here and what they're sharing? So, and then we'll break into groups and figure out the next steps after that. But for starters, these folks will help us set a stage. So thank you, Leilani, again. We really have enjoyed being with you this week.
Leilani, can you hold in the button again? So light turns on.
Red light or
Yep, I think that's good.
test? Yeah. Is it good? Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna stand because I get energy if I stand. And I'm so short. You might be able to see me better if I stand. Yeah, so actually, I'm making a notebook. One of the things, I mean, it's always, first of all, it's been lovely to be here. And I only regret that I came here off of another trip, and that was overseas, and I'm in Palestine or the occupied Palestinian territories, and I got here a little bit exhausted. So I only regret that I wasn't my usual. I'm known for my energy, and I think I was a little bit flagging. So my apologies, but it's been great to be here. There are lots of surprises about Pittsburgh, I have to say, and the architecture was one of them. A total treat, and I actually think that, and maybe you all do this, but I think you should spend time with the beautiful architecture in your city, because it shows some strength of this city or something. The combination of steel and beauty is like really something. It's unusual, you know. You don't think of steel and beauty necessarily, but in this town it's fully represented. So now I don't know the history of all of that. Maybe there's some bad history there, but maybe you learn from that too. So one of the things I've noticed here, and you know, 4 days, lots of meetings. I don't feel like I talked with like a huge, diverse array of people. So it's a slice. What you're getting is a slice. But I think that the language of human rights is not new to most of you advocates and academics, etc. It's clear that it's a language that resonates. You're using it. The concepts you're using, etc. It's of course more rooted in civil rights. Do you think it's the battery?
It might be if you hold it in and click it just like one time, if it turns green. Not that it's low battery. It'll die. Audio is on here. So as long as
It's
you
like
put-
Fluttering. It's gotta be
Let's see.
better.
There we go. Oh, no. It's like flashing. Red.
Okay, then I can hear you perfectly
Okay.
fine on audio, so
So
as
I'll
long
just
as you
put it down.
project, we're good.
I'll put it down. Yeah, so, and the language of civil rights is a little different than the language of the human right to housing. And I think that, just as a general observation, I think there's a little bit of distance to go there. For all of you to get really familiar with what does the right to adequate housing mean, and for the city folks that I met, like, they were way behind, like.
Tell it,
they-
tell it.
Yeah, so they really, but one of the things, and I'm not, this isn't fluff, what I'm saying. One of the things I've noticed in countries and cities where I've worked is the fluency, literally, how the words, the human right to housing, come off of the tongue. The fluency increases with the comfort, with the concepts, and with the willingness to do something about it. I've really noticed this. So in Canada, for example, when the Prime Minister of our country first talked about housing and human rights, he got it totally wrong. Like it was, I forget, he said, human rights or housing rights or something like that, which is not what we wanted him to say. It was kind of bungled. He was like literally stuttering. It was in a scrum. And I recently was at a meeting where he was presenting and he said, now we have legislation, right, that that's been adopted that recognizes housing as a fundamental human right. And he said at this meeting with lots of fluency. And of course, housing is a human right. And we were all like, okay, finally, he's come around. And of course, we've seen that trajectory with legislation. So it's not light to say, you've got to build fluency amongst yourselves, and then you've got to give that fluency and teach the language and the concepts to people in decision-making power. So that's my first observation. I do think, and I said this at my very first day here, my first hours here practically, I did say that I think that Pittsburgh has this opportunity, this window, we can call it an opportunity. I think the window, I don't know how wide open it is, and I don't know how quickly it's going to close. But I see a lot of red flags here in terms of things not going in a good direction. You have a sad history of, having been a bigger city and now you're half its size. And as a result of that and a whole bunch of other things, you have a housing market that is attractive to outsiders and to people, insiders who want to make a lot of money. And that is like, that's the red flag, right? So as I said, when you hear that New Yorkers are coming here and buying homes, that's not good. That's a bad thing. And when you have, as I've said several times now, Greystar, this big private equity, I think they're constructed as a private equity firm, or maybe it's asset management anyway, coming in and building student housing, that's not a good thing because it's too expensive and they have that whole business model that's predatory. So you've got all these things, and you have a 13% decline in your African-American population. I mean, that is obviously devastating.
But Lonnie, that's over a 4-year period. People get that wrong. That's over from
Over a
2014 to
4-year
2018. 4 years.
4 year, not 10 years.
4 years.
4-year period. That's the, I mean,
That's devastating.
right? That's alarming. And so you're just at this moment when I feel like it's not too late, but there's some real warning signs. And there's probably more. If I were here doing like a proper analysis, I probably could have figured out exactly, if I visited banks and things like that, then I might have had a better sense also. And so then the question is, okay, so if you have this window, what do you do with it if this is right? And I have some suggestions. This really has to come from you all. and be driven by need and community need. But just at a kind of meta level, or macro zoomed out level, the city doesn't seem to have a comprehensive housing plan, and so I should call it a strategy. I don't want to call it a plan, a strategy. And that surprises me. I mean, there's a housing crisis. Like everyone knows there's a housing crisis. Every city is confronted with the housing crisis across the United States, for sure, and most places, frankly. And I find it really surprising that there isn't a housing strategy in place. So you could advocate for a housing strategy, but you won't get a rights-based housing strategy unless you advocate for a rights-based housing strategy. And I would highly recommend that you do that, because what's at play here is obviously human rights. When you have 13% of your African-American population being displaced, that is a human rights issue tied very much to housing and displacement and, housing development, we can call it. And so it only makes sense then, just if you're just looking at that little piece, it makes sense that you would have a rights-based housing strategy to address the displacement of African Americans here. You've got homelessness here, that's clear, that's a human rights violation. So you need a strategy to address that that's human rights based. You have development happening here that is leading to other kinds of displacement, edging people out, unaffordability. Those are all human rights issues. Security of tenure, affordability. I think I've talked to some of you at least about that before. Those are central components of the right to adequate housing. And so you need a strategy that's going to improve, protect affordability, that's going to protect security of tenure. So that would be a big piece that you could pick up, and you are the right people to do that. And if I were you, I would be drafting that strategy or collectively and with communities. And I mean, I don't know Pittsburgh well enough to know how you would do it. And, would you do it neighborhood, because it's so complicated here. So many, anyway, you would figure that out, how to do that. But that's my the first idea. And then the other idea that I've been thinking about, and I think I can't tell you, I think I'm better to maybe tell you about a process rather than the actual thing, but let me explain. I do think you should be using what we're going to call the Human Rights Commission, now the Human Relations Commission, or maybe the center. I don't know exactly how the center is being configured and what it can and can't do, but I think you should try to figure out a legal challenge to some of the development that's happening here. And why I say I can't tell you which one is because I didn't get enough information about any one development project underway or that's on the horizon to say, oh, that one. You need to figure out where do you have a claimant? Where might you have a claimant? Someone who is about to be displaced or has recently been displaced. You need a sympathetic claimant. You would need good evidence, statistics, social science research to back up whatever claim you're making. You're probably going to be making a race discrimination claim, I would imagine. And so you need obviously solid evidence, especially because you're probably going to be making a adverse impact or adverse effect argument, which is harder to prove, although discrimination is just simply hard to prove using an evidentiary base, but in any event. And the other thing is you need to believe you could win the case. Never undertake any kind of litigation if you don't think you're going to win, because I don't believe in using litigation for political ends. I don't think that that's appropriate. It's not fair to the claimant. It's not fair to the legal system. So I do think, though, it's an interesting move. You will not make friends with the city. You will most likely you'd end up joining the city. So it would probably be the developer, the city, who's probably backing the developer and giving whatever tax concessions, property tax concession type waiving height restrictions, that kind of thing. So you would probably end up it's not a friendly move, but it is a serious move, and it would show serious intention. And I mean, you might decide, let's see how the strategy idea goes and human rights, and let's see it, because this administration at city level is new for you, right? It's only been in place since January. There's some good signs, but I think the thing that everyone's celebrating, this Walnut Capital, and he got a few, I don't know, some extra affordable units, seemed weak to me. Big deal. Like, we do not, from a human rights place, you do not applaud politicians for not even meeting their human rights obligations. No. To me, there's no celebration there. I never celebrate. It's one of the things that distinguishes probably me as an advocate. I absolutely will not celebrate unless a government really does something that is in compliance with the human rights obligations. Getting a few, I mean, I don't know, those units, like how many units were actually needed? How many should he have preserved? What? Anyway, so those are my two ideas for what they're worth. Obviously, I'd love to remain in conversation with Jackie and all of you to sort of brainstorm. I'm happy to be part of meetings that come out of this. You know, the more now, of course, I'm engaged in Pittsburgh, so the more I read, it'll become one of my Google alerts, and you know, I'll be constantly sort of trying to monitor what's happening. So I'm happy to keep the conversation going.
So I can ask you a question?
Yeah.
The part of affordable, right?
Yeah.
So how would you define that?
Yeah, so international law is really clear on that. I'll tell you how we don't define it.
Okay.
So we don't define it based on what markets can command.
Okay.
And so we do base it on what a household can afford. And the setting of rents should start with household incomes. In some countries, what they do is they take like a band. So let's say minimum wage employees.
Right.
This is how much they can afford. Janitors, paramedics, some nurses, personal support workers.
Right.
They generally make between this amount and this amount. This is what they can afford. And that's actually how development projects should start. They never start that way. It's the opposite. It's like, how much profit can we make?
Okay.
And how much, it's always based on square footage in the sky, property taxes, rents that they can then charge to get back. So a human rights approach starts completely differently. It starts from the people.
Okay.
And that's how affordability ends up getting
So what if they
decided.
use a percentage model?
Yeah, so some people will then say, so human rights law does not actually articulate the 30% that a lot of people use. Yeah, so you won't find that anywhere in international human rights law as part of the law or interpretation of the law.
Right.
And I'm actually personally not totally wedded to 30% because there's a lot of wiggle room there. Like some people can, depending on the social supports they have in their own lives, they can live off of, you know, spending 40% of their income on rent, or even
Right.
50% sometimes. You know, if grandma does childcare and auntie serves you a meal 3 times a week, you and your family meals, maybe you're spending less on groceries and you don't have childcare expenses, and so you could give up 50% of your income. So there has to be some wiggle room, which is why I'm not like, oh yeah, 30%. It is a good guide, 30%. It may be an unrealistic guide. Like if you look in some populations, a huge portion of the population, renter population, would be spending more than 30% of their income on rent. And if you think, well, God, we'd have to, like, how would we get all of those people to just pay 30%? We're way down that road. So it's a,
So usually they're doing 60% here. Like they'll say 30 at the front door, get in the back room and come out with 60.
is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So that's why I asked you about. the
60 is
percentage, like,
high, especially if you're low
Yes.
income.
Yes,
I will
So-
say that. I can
so-
say that.
right, because that's why I always kept saying affordable for who, because they
Yeah.
kept saying that's why, now you can find it from now, I
Exactly.
understand that.
Well, then, I mean, a rights-based approach to development. So, I mean, governments don't like it when I say this. They never agree with me, but in some circumstances, in some cities, in fact, what should happen is every single new unit that is built should be built for a low income person, period. Period.
I love her.
Right? I mean, that would be a human rights-based approach. You address need first.
Right.
Now, you say, well, there's probably still need at other levels, true. But let's figure it out. Let's do audits of need within cities. That's another, sorry, that is the other recommendation I wanted to make, which is I do think every city should do an audit. And you're not gonna get government to do that. You have to do that yourself. It's not easy, but you have urban geographers here who can help. Find out who owns your city. What rents are people paying? Like a real audit of your housing stock. And it's, this is not an easy thing to do. But tenants themselves are doing it in Germany, for example. They've taken it upon themselves. And they don't have access. I don't know what the access is here, but they don't have access to beneficial ownership. So they can't walk into a government office and say, I want to find out who owns 320 Lenox Street.
Right.
They're not even allowed to do that. The land registry is not open to the public in Germany. And so they're going around trying to figure out 7 cities who owns every single building and what rents are being paid. So it's a tall task, but it would help a lot, right? And then you could say, well, look, we know we have this number of people in need, but what's being built is all at this end where we don't have as much need. Very powerful to say that to government.
One more question, please.
I'll try
What
to be
legal
shorter in my
remedies
answer.
could we do, because the cost of living in Pittsburgh has not gone up in 30 years? What legal remedy could we take an avenue on to make this a challenge so it can be
What hasn't gone up in 30 years?
the cost of living? Some people still make the $7.25.
Oh.
We fight.
Minimum
it.
wage.
Minimum wage. Yeah, minimum wage, thank you.
Yeah.
So what legal remedy could we use to make this an issue?
Don't ask me.
Okay.
There's another special rapporteur for that.
Yeah, extreme poverty, and he already came to the country
Yeah.
and talked a lot about, actually, it's a report worth looking at. Maybe Jackie, you could make it available to people. So my colleague, Philip Alston, who lives in New York, but he's of Australian origin, came here maybe 4 years ago. And, no, longer than that, COVID. I always forget the COVID years, maybe 5 years ago. And he did a thorough examination of poverty in the US and came up with a whole slew of recommendations. This is when Donald Trump was still president.
No,
So
it
it's
wasn't our
completely
president.
discounted, but it's actually a really brilliant report, and Philip is really brilliant. So he came up with all sorts of things. So look at that report. You
Okay.
saved me.
So I have a perfect model for us to start exactly what you said,
Oh, yeah.
the perfect model.
So that's gonna
Right.
come after we give these
Okay,
guys a chance, okay? So, Ty, do you wanna just start off the panel and share your thoughts?
Yeah,
And
sorry, I
tell
had
us
to
about
make a
your.
note about the perfect model. I
Yeah.
can't forget about that. But, how y'all doing? My name is Teireik Williams. I work at the CREATElab at Carnegie Mellon University. I'm from Pittsburgh. I'm a Pittsburgh native. I'm a grassroots activist and organizer. A lot of the work that I do comes at the intersection. A lot of the work that I do comes at the intersection of combining quantitative and qualitative data together to create narratives through data visualizations that display what is actually happening on a ground grassroots level. A lot of this work goes towards equipping organizations, community organizations, thought partners, communities of practice with data visualizations and different tools to help them make their cases about different things that are happening disparately across the city of Pittsburgh and across the nation as a whole. I'm definitely interested in any type of work that is action oriented, that engages the residents of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to action to address the different things that are holding them back from achieving the reality that they want to see happen for their communities as well as themselves. I'm a thorough resource to anybody that is organizing on any level. I like to make myself available for people that are organizing, whether it be in a planning stage or we're getting to it stage. I'm 27 years old. I like to make that a point because oftentimes I am the youngest person in the room that we are organizing in. And it's my goal and hope exhaustively to engage my peers and the people that are the same age as me and younger than me to get them involved in this effort, because a lot of the people that I respect and hold in high regard are older than me. And I see that, you know, in a lot of cases, it's that they are suffering from fatigue, or in a lot of cases, you know, they've been doing this for a long time. And it is essential that the younger generation steps up and definitely takes some of that work and effort off of their plate. So that's definitely something that I prioritize in my work. So I'm definitely excited and willing and interested to work with a lot of and every person in this room. Like I said, I'm at the CREATElab, which is the Community Robotics Education and Technology Empowerment. And I'm also the president of our South Oakland Neighborhood Group, which is a community association in South Oakland, which oversees a lot of the work that's being done in Oakland. So love y'all. Glad to be here.
Great, and if y'all can maybe speak, there's 3 ideas on the table from Leilani, and so the housing strategy, the human rights-based housing strategy, the idea of some kind of creative legal strategy to tackle this problem of mass displacement of African-American residents, and the third is an audit of our housing needs and ownership. Is that a good way to phrase that last?
Yeah, sure. And can I ever see data visualization on
Oh,
that?
yeah. I think we need that for all of
You
that.
gotta get out there.
So, Jason,
You want us to go introduce ourselves first and then come back to that, or?
do you want time to think about it, or
No, I'm just
I think-
asking if I want time, okay.
explain I think the more you can, we'll do it in one round if
Okay.
possible, because then we'll bring the room in.
Yeah, so good evening, everybody. My name is Jason Bieri. I am the Director of Applied Research at Urbankind Institute. And also partially of note, I'm also kind of the project manager of a network that we're building at Urbankind Institute called Equitable and Just Greater Pittsburgh, where we're trying to really kind of build a cross-issue, cross-neighborhood, cross-municipality network that really thinks about a lot of the challenges that we face in this city and region from an intersectional perspective, right? Recognizing that all these things interconnect. So, you know, while we're here talking about housing tonight, we have to think about all those other things that go along with housing and that reinforce the challenges of housing and displacement from housing, such as transportation, childcare, disruption of the social networks, access to food, access to transportation, changing from school district to school district as you get displaced and moved across the city and county. I think one of the things that I want to say before we start is I think I just want to say that it's important to recognize all of the work that took to get us here today. You know, Leilani, you're talking about a window of opportunity right now, and this window wouldn't exist if the work of all of the activists in the city hadn't been fighting the fight for a long time now. And a lot of that work has been done by Black women in particular and Black men across the city. And I just want to recognize them and all of you who are here today, who have really been struggling to fight this fight and keeping on doing it, despite everything that this world and city has thrown at you all. So just we're in debt to all of you for making this window possible, for allowing us the opportunity to be able to help you make the city better. So thank you all for that. I just want to say that to start. to come to some of the questions, I think one of the really important things that we need to be thinking about as we do this work is that we can't just be thinking about the city of Pittsburgh. We need to be thinking about the county. We need to be thinking about all the municipalities in the county. Because if there's not a strategy for any of the municipalities outside of the city, it doesn't matter. Because everybody who's in the city now is getting pushed out to the county. And so we really need to be thinking about any type of legal strategy as one that really recognizes that we're going to have a lot of different strategies and a lot of different tactics to really address the problem from a regional perspective. And that's a really big challenge. But it's one that we really need to be thinking about because we don't have a county government right now that really supports it. And a lot of our municipalities don't support really focusing on affordable housing. They're still coming from this mindset, this deficit-based mindset. You know, we need to bring more people here. We need to bring more skilled workers here. And that's the way that we're going to grow, right? But we know that we can train the people, develop the workforce that we have here. And part of that is really securing housing, making sure that people aren't leaving the city and county. And I think, you know, to really think about this question of who owns the city and understanding what's going on. Again, you know, we need to be doing that at a regional level. And we need to be thinking both as well about not just the data, not just the numbers. We need to be thinking about the experiences as well, right? What does it mean to be evicted in practice? What is the feeling of being evicted, right? We can't just, you know, there are a lot of people from the universities here, a lot of professionals here tonight. You know, we can't, who I suspect come from backgrounds where we've been fortunate to not have to deal with eviction or the threat of eviction. And we need to recognize that we need to be in service to the people who have been doing this work, who have been struggling throughout the last several decades to make a life of it here in Pittsburgh. So we need to be able to combine those things, which is what Ty is doing is so valuable, right? Blending the stories with the numbers, right? So we need to be recognizing what our skill sets are and recognizing our own kind of positionality in this struggle. You know, how do I use my voice to support those people who are also fighting, right? How do we use our positions, or how do people use their positions at the university to do the research, to get access to the information? How do we use the resources of the lawyers to be able to make those legal challenges? And then how do we really work together using all of our skill sets to build something strong together? And that, I think, is how we also understand both the city and kind of how we operate together. And there's a lot to do, right? And I think one of the biggest challenges is really understanding the dynamics of the whole region, right? We can worry about housing issues here in the city of Pittsburgh. At the same time, you go up to Cranberry, you go out to South Point in Washington County, you see $400,000 homes being built in these large developments, right? And I don't understand, right? I'm interested in these things and I just don't understand what's going on. And I think the other thing that we need to be aware of, and part of this is thinking about a human rights strategy. And going back to what I was saying earlier about thinking about our ideas, our issues as connected. Climate change is happening, folks. Right? Ed and I were talking about this on the way here, right? Every rainstorm now is a downpour, right? And you look at all these houses. We need to be talking less about just affordable homes, but affordable and healthy homes.
Yeah.
Right? Because looking at the hillside over there on the south side slopes, right? You can look around at any of the windows out here, and you can see homes that are in need of repair. They might be affordable, sure, but are they safe to live in? And so on top of understanding, just the number of units that are available, we also need to be understanding, are they healthy units to be living in? Are they prepared for heavier rainfalls? Are they prepared for landslides? Are they prepared for hotter summers and possibly colder winters, right? And the answer is no, right? We need to do the accounting on that to really understand the scale of this problem. I'll just end there. I could go on for a while.
Well, that's a great thing for me to pick up on. So I'm Ed Nusser. I am the Executive Director of City of Bridges Community Land Trust. So City of Bridges Community Land Trust is a 3-year-old organization. Folks that might not know what a community land trust is, CLTs for short, we exist to create and preserve homes that remain affordable in perpetuity. Homes that are removed from the speculative market that displaces people, that evicts people, that forecloses on people. And I think because Jason hit on this as well, it's important. I like to always introduce the idea of the CLT by saying, I'm here standing on the shoulders of giants as part of the CLT movement. The CLT movement started 52 years ago in a town called Albany, Georgia, which, if you guys remember the news a couple of years ago, Albany, Georgia was one of the first non-metropolitan COVID hotspots in our country. It's rural, it's predominantly Black, it's predominantly poor. And in that town, the CLT movement got started because 52 short years ago, Black families, Black farmers who had been farming land for generations were being kicked off that land. They were tenant farmers on for having the audacity to try to vote in local elections. So they came together and said, okay, if we don't own this, if the market owns this, we're never gonna get ahead in this system. But we can do something together that we can never do by ourselves. That's what the idea of the CLT grew from, is this idea of communal land ownership, that we're all in this together, that my success is bound up in Ty's success and bound up in Jason's success. But our traditional real estate system doesn't look at it that way. The traditional real estate system says, if I'm selling my house to Jason, I'm in a battle against Jason. I'm in a battle against my neighbor. Because every dollar of wealth that I want to get from my house is a dollar of wealth that Jason's going to lose because he's giving it to me. And so what the land trust model is built on of this idea is permanent affordability of homes that are secure, security of tenure. Folks are secure in that ownership. They own their home, but they agree up front that they're part of a bigger thing than just themselves. And they agree to the idea that, yeah, when I sell this house, I'll be able to make a little bit of money. But when I sell it, I'm going to sell it to someone just like me. And that removes the speculative force, the market force from housing. And I think it's late and it's a Thursday, so I'm a little extra cynical tonight. But right, like Leilani, you said, we don't have a housing strategy in the city. I think we do. We just don't call it that. Our housing strategy is the private market. That's our housing strategy. Our housing strategy is whatever a bank will underwrite will get built. And whatever a bank won't underwrite won't get built because there isn't the political will to create the public resources to build that housing where the private market won't act. Now I'm getting on my soapbox. I think I'm going to stop there, kind of introduce the organization. But to go to the questions and the ideas, I think I want to hear more about security of tenure as a human right. I'm going to bug you about that because I want to hear. Yeah. Things they don't tell you in America. But I think an audit of housing, a strategy of housing in our city that centers people. And centers the people who, we called them for a couple of years essential workers, and now I think it's back to minimum wage, and they're fine. They'll be fine regardless. They were essential for a hot minute there. But we don't center those folks in our housing ideas. We don't center the felt need and the felt experience in our in our housing strategy. You know, I share personally, you know, my parents were foreclosed on, and, you know, that's a power dynamic, right? That's the power dynamic that, you know, we'll talk about the political power structures, but the financial institutions that exist, the power systems that they've built to make sure they always win, because they do always win, is real. And so I think like creating, yes, moving towards what is a regional housing strategy that takes into account the 130 municipalities, that takes into account the interconnectedness, whether we want to admit it or not, of the city and the suburbs to each other. And then, yeah, moving forward with how do we take advantage of the brilliant people like Ty and others at CMU to look at what is the state of housing in our city? Because we say, you know, one of the things that my team jokes that I'm like a wind-up doll and you pull a string in my back and you hear like one of 3 sentences. But one of them I always use is housing isn't affordable if it's not affordable to live in. So it doesn't matter what your rent is, it doesn't matter what your mortgage is, if your gas bill is $400 a month in the winter. It doesn't matter what your rent is if your basement floods every time it rains, you're dealing with mold and mildew. It doesn't matter. And so you have to have a broader definition of what affordability is. And because I kind of brought cynicism and everything into it, I'll shut up with this. We got here, we didn't get here overnight. We got here because 400 years of white supremacy have been baked into our real estate, have been baked into our lending, have been baked into our political systems. We're not going to undo that overnight. I hope to hell we do it faster than the next 400 years. But it took us 400 years to get to this point. It's going to take concerted effort. And it's going to take folks that are on the younger side of things picking the ball up and saying, okay, we're going to take it as far as we can. And folks that come after us are going to take it the next few steps. And I think it takes the people in this room, all of us collectively realizing we're all in this together. We're all rolling in the same direction. Some folks are going to tap out first, and that's okay. You've earned your rest, and the rest of us will take it from here.
Thank you. My name is Randall. I'm an organizer with Penn Plaza Support and Action Coalition. And I think the first thing I'd like to say this evening is there is a mass displacement taking place right now in East Liberty on Ridge Street. There are 20 residents who received a notice in November that they had to vacate by February and April at the latest. And so I've been trying to reach out to some people in our housing movement to see if we can support those people in any kind of way, raise them some money if they don't have enough to move or rent or security. It's probably too late to do anything about preventing them from losing their home, but we should try to stand with them and to see how we can support those people at a very devastating moment.
And management trying to find these people somewhere?
They're not, at Penn Plaza, they gave us a Craigslist. That's what that's the list of the support that we received. And so you can't expect, that was from the city. So you can't expect anything more unless we can try to come together and try to support them.
Okay.
So again, we're not talking about hundreds of people, we're talking about, maybe 3 dozen people, but we should. So if everybody knows how to get in touch with me, if there's something that we want to try to do to try to support them, that should be first. And I want to say thank you very much, Leilani, for gracing us with your presence in this city. That's why I followed you around all week, because I just kept learning new things. The biggest thing I learned is there are solutions, to this. So I just maybe like to follow up a little bit what Jason said about, and I always started off, when I first said it, I was being a smart ass when I was saying, thank you, Lawrence Gumber. I said it first at a big meeting we had, Leilani, to show you how big our meeting was. There were 8 inches of snow on the ground. And of course, it was a city meeting. Of course, they didn't organize. They didn't want people to be there. And so we're 8 inches on the ground. We had like 250 people. Wow. And that was the first time I said, thank you, Lawrence Gumber. He was the owner of Penn Plaza. Him and his 2 sons, who we called, not a very nice man.
No.
Not a very generous man. And boy, did they love him. And so, but that night I said, thank you, Lawrence Gumber, because he birthed our housing justice movement. And it's been an amazing movement. As people know, I was on the school board, so I was about education of young people until I lost my home. And all the things that go with that, and those feelings and those emotions and the devastation of seeing what was happening to other people who weren't in a position to help themselves like I was. And so from that movement, there was a group who were going to zoning meetings, trying to stop the zoning around Penn Plaza. I was devastated that year after. So I didn't even know anybody was doing something. I was just devastated, and Leilani even gave some understanding of some of the emotions I had besides guilt and other things that I couldn't do more. And she said, again, when people's human rights are violated, they know it no matter where they are. And that was the feeling I felt, that my rights as a human being had been violated. Nobody, particularly our city government, came to our defense. And so maybe about the January or February, just me, Mel Packer, Carl Redwood, Carmen, we just got in front of a camera. I don't know what we only know we said. We just said we were gonna fight something.
Exactly right.
We had no way, we didn't have a clue. I just said, we're gonna fight out.
Do it together.
And they reported it. And so, and from that, some people came to us, like Helen Gerhardt and others, and they said, we meet and we're trying to do some preparing. From that meeting came the Penn. I don't even know how the name Penn Plaza Court Action came along. But we had so many people that came out from everywhere to help us. Universities. So people came and organized with us for 90 days. We never heard from them again. It was amazing how that happened, and the things we did, and the creativity with our actions. The media was just eating it up. That wasn't the first mass displacement in East Liberty. They had done it before. So why wouldn't they think they could get away with it again? And of course, the all-time famous one is when we put the furniture and the couch and the thing across from Target in the middle of the busy intersection of East Liberty and said, "This is our home." And of course, let us remember, Miss Myrtle is with us.
Yeah.
And she's doing fine. We were able to move her back to East Liberty.
Oh, hallelujah. Thank you, Jesus.
But Miss Mabel lost us, but they were two seniors who had been, this was their third time being displaced
Yeah.
from the community.
Mhm.
And those seniors, talk about getting tired. Them elderly ladies got out and fought us hard.
Oh, man.
Remember that famous one where Bill Peduto, and we went to something Bill Peduto was doing, and he's trying to sneak past Miss Myrtle and Miss Mabel.
Me and Myrtle and Mabel were out there trapping it.
Then they seen him and he just had to take it. So again, I am thoroughly optimistic that we're going to succeed, that we're going to succeed. And hanging with Leilani, it even brings it home to folks who are listening to this, who think you're safe in your home. You're not. For those of you who one day hope to own a home and start a family, that dream is being gobbled up right now in this city. So we have an opportunity, a small opportunity, to begin to move this city, and again, put people first and human rights first.
Here, here.
So we have a new mayor now. And we're optimistic that he's going to be different than what we've always had. As Ed described, we've always had a housing policy, whatever the developers and rich people want. So this mayor, we hope you're different. And folks, I'm running for office, so I'm not trying to piss off the new mayor, but it ain't about that.
Right.
So we're all on the honeymoon, but the challenge is going to come. The test is going to come on whose side you're on. I'd rather it come sooner rather than later, so that we know what we got to do. If we don't have a friend in that office, we need to know now so we can organize and plan for that. I believe that we have a friend in the office for now, but we'll have to see. But the solutions are here. We're all working together. CREATElab has worked with Penn Plaza. We're all working now, Center for Shared Prosperity. All of us work together. And we're working now, me and Ed right now are working on hopefully bringing the first tenant-owned cooperative to this city. Luckily, we've had foundations who supported that vision that have been equally disturbed. And so we hope very, very shortly, we're going to be out talking to people about tenant-owned cooperatives. We're going to hopefully have a white paper, I call it business plan, about how the dollars and things work. So there are solutions on the table.
Yes.
The city has the money.
Yes.
And we're just going to see what happens. So I'm optimistic that we can solve this issue. Again, on the Board of Education or in American education period, we have never figured out how to educate every child everywhere, regardless of zip code, race, whatever, to the fullest of their ability. American education has never figured that out. But the solutions around housing are right there. And Franklin Roosevelt started off with this 30 years ago, or 70 years ago, the government builds, owns, and maintains its housing. And I'll finish with this. We were at that meeting, very unfortunate meeting you were at yesterday. But one thing that came out of that was the guy from the Allegheny County Housing Authority. He says now the Housing Authority of Allegheny is trying to purchase homes that they own and that they maintain to house our people. So that's very optimistic. And the government is now right back to where Franklin Roosevelt told us where we should be. We don't went through hell, but they're getting there now. We got to push them back to that ultimate solution in housing that the government builds, owns, and maintains housing for its people.
All right.
I hope I did that.
That was big. So, Leilani, do you have any kind of quick
I have a million
responses?
questions for all four of you. But I don't think that's fair. I think there's a lot of people who have things to say.
Oh, yes.
So, so we have a bit of a dilemma, and you guys are all organizers, so you can appreciate this situation. We have half an hour. And the plan for this part of the meeting was to break into small groups and figure out around these three ideas possibly of how we can get some real action planned, like get some point people and some thoughts about what resources and skills and ideas and talents people and groups can throw into these three different projects, collective projects. And so, do you think we can do that? Do a breakout session into these three segments?
How much time do you have left?
Half an hour?
Can we just stay in a big
20 minutes.
group?
Just stand a bit.
Or stay in a big group?
Yeah.
I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think it's a
so-
manageable group.
Fellow organizers, how do we do this? Should we talk about each strategy, or what do you think?
I know there were some questions and comments. Can we-
Should we just?
Can we,
see what
can
comes
we
up?
start and then?
Well, as long as we have some ideas of leaders who we need a leader full movement. So I'm hoping I like all these three.
Yeah, because I mean,
projects.
these three are
There's a lot.
excellent to.
But I'm hoping that at least there's one or two or three people who say, I'm really interested in this, I'm gonna throw down and put some time.
But
into
Jeff, do you remember when we were talking about the ARPA money last year that even Councilwoman Deb Gross supported us? Remember doing that audit? Remember Tim Stevens there about doing an audit of all the projects? They said Detroit had done, or somebody had done that. It doesn't take that long to do it.
There you go.
So yeah, that's what I was talked about last year.
These are all possible,
So I just want to say this, right, real quick, in like 3 minutes. So I'm from Housing Authority, right? I live there. So now they're doing what's called the choice grant. So in the process of doing the choice grant, HUD recommends that residents have a tenant council to represent the residents. Currently, they got 8 elected officials, 6 delegates, that's like the Hill CDC and all these other people in churches and reverends, and 1 person representing 411 subsidized units on the board. Now, there's no way in the world 1 person can represent 411 subsidized units. The tenant council is not legitimate. The bylaws aren't even, they're not even notarized. So the last time we argued that, they changed the bylaws for the lady who's been running for the last 14 years. She can only run twice and she has to remember the post. So she's been there 14 years. So we challenged that. They went in the back room, come out with some new bylaws where she could run again. And this is the 1 person they have on the board. Now, so the model I was saying was exactly what she was saying. Since this is a $300 and something million development. So they want to tell a story in order to get the grant. So I said, why can't you tell this story that we want to be self-sufficient? Why can't you take some of this money, give us Francis Street, allow us to take Francis Street, build our own situation, where we build a warehouse or something like that, and we can be self-sufficient, find our own developer, build our own housing, and then we'll have that situation right there for ourselves, so that when we do engage the city, that we can engage the city by having our own to bring to the table. Because as of now, when we come to the table, as the people we are, we have nothing to offer because they're offering it for us. So I feel like somewhere along the line, being that this is 2022, that we should be able to do that. Amidst all of the stuff that we're through, the people that died, so they could be where they are. Get that? So that's why I was wondering, like when she said the model, I was like, wow. So to your point, practice. If we practice, take different situations and practice as a unit on each situation, like doctors and lawyers, it's practice that brings perfection. Right. And so every situation is always going to wind up either the same or close to the same. So it'll be like a situation where we'll create a model in order for when we engage these type of situations, right? We'll be able to already know what to do. We don't even, like, it'll be a couple of us that have been on there a long time where you could just look at it, you know, even if it's back like a doctor or a lawyer, he just looks at it and says, oh, I know what that is. Here, you know what I'm saying? And so as the years go by or the months or whatever, as a unit, and we all practice on one situation and take the odds and the ends and the you know, the glitches and this and that and the other, we get better at it as a unit and we all get to grow together. So I was saying, well, why don't we take this model, since it's right in front of us, it's right in the beginning, the train is running, but it's not that far off. And it's not that far off to the point where we can't derail it. The derailment comes from the fact of not having the inclusion of the residents. Everything is being did, all right?
So that's good. I'm putting this under how
Good job.
our
That's-
strategy. I think those are good points.
We also need to do our intervention and prevention. Like gentlemen spoke right here, when all the foreclosures came, the community organizers went around and tried to tell everybody that this was coming. No one listened to us. They got mad at our organization and tried to, you know, get rid of us. Oh, they got rid of Acorn, but we just changed our name. But we still came back to let the people know what was coming.
Yeah.
So intervention and prevention will be a big piece. So we could know, just like you said, we gotta know what it is, where it come from, who owns it. Let's tell the people the truth. But we're not being told the truth, so we gotta come up with some intervention and prevention.
I would just add, brother, you started out saying that there's one person who's representing 411 tenants. So that in of itself, if they're calling this a tenants council, you could challenge that by essentially saying this is a misnomer.
Didn't I tell you that?
It's not a tenants council.
So I know, I understand that, but the elections and they have her in the back room. And so to get to management, so I'm advocating, well, hold, how y'all gonna do this, right? But I'm one person being attacked. And then the other people who I'm bringing with me as I'm moving forward, they're jumping around and selling out for chicken dinner and gift cards. So when I get to the front line, I say, me and my people don't want this. They say, you and what people?
That's right.
So, I mean, so I'm just, look, I'm just pushing the energy. I'm not making no demands. I'm not doing nothing. I'm just pushing energy. That's all. I don't mean no harm to them or anybody else. I don't know what else to do. I'm just thanking God that she came and mentioned me. And this is a situation that's kind of like my blessings of being, like he said, been doing this for
Yeah,
years.
we came to support him, but because
Yeah.
the outside entity, they're not from Pittsburgh. All these developers from outside came in, moved into the property, which is a violation of the resident rights. That's why he couldn't get in. So we need to make sure, we don't need no outside entities coming and telling us how to run our resident council. Management should not be on our resident councils telling us what to do, bringing these outsiders in. That is for the people who live there. So that's another issue we need to deal with as well.
I just believe we can work, like you said, all of us work together. Whether it's this situation or not, we have to practice together
Yeah,
in order for us to be a force.
yeah.
That's all I'm saying. That's my main point. Like we all have to be committed to practicing together. So when the situations come, we already have like a roadmap to, because they're gonna all be the same going down the road.
Sorry, I'll touch that real quick. I definitely believe in the power, especially in grassroots organizations. Like I wear a couple of different hats, but one of the largest hats that I wear is the president of a community organization. And I feel like when larger organizations, even development corporations, different things like that, like they realize that, you know, when a organization that is grassroots is isolated, you know, from all of the other organizations in the city, you know, that's a time where they can take advantage of these people's, whether it be limited capacity or, you know, just the fact that they can't organize quick enough for us to take advantage of them, you know?
Right.
And so like, I definitely believe that there is a power in a lot of the resident councils, tenant councils, because like you say, one person representing 411 units, that's ridiculous. You know, it's not going to work. You know, and like we've had, you know, similar situations, you know, coming up with, like I say, like the Oakland plan, you know, a plan that has the interest of so many different people, you know, universities, hospitals, businesses, all these different things. The residents definitely drew the short end of the stick there. And that was, you know, a reiterative battle, you know, like, no, this is not equitable, you know, and it's like, they'll look at it and say, well, this is equal, you know, everybody has two for each, you know, place, but it's not equitable, you know, like there's this many residents. And really how I see things is in a residential area, a place where people live, you know, the residents' voice shouldn't be equal, if you asking me. Like, this is where we need to start, you know, how these people, how their lived experiences are going to pan out every day, because I got a business here or because I got a school here, you know, like that's where we should start. You know, we should start with the lives that are affected day in, day out. And like, I think that there needs to be some type of collaboration between the tenant unions in the city so that people can't get, you know, y'all, they're not looking at y'all like, oh, well, we're gonna take advantage of them. Oh, but we can't take advantage of these people in Lawrenceville because they got the political will and the people coming day in, day or whatever, you know, it don't matter. We need to have that type of support across the board so that people know that the residents of the city have political will and they're not just going to back down to whatever we say profit wise. So I support that.
Well, Ty, that goes back to like reframing as like, for the organizers in the room, that goes back to like reframing about the idea of who owns the neighborhood, right? Right? Because like we just deferred to like, you know, the UPMCs, the institutions. Oh yeah, well, of course, you know, they're job creators. So maybe I don't want them to get more of us, you know. And it's like, it's reframing this idea about like, no, like, it's the people who live here that make this what it is. Y'all are guests in our place. So it's like, it's about reframing that and the idea, right, of like resident power and trying to take back that political power that we've given, that not we, but we've had taken from by us, you know, by the institutions, right?
Yeah, I agree. And like a lot of the conversations that like I have here, like my peers is like centered around like, well, how do you want, you know, this environment to look? Because the people that are, you know, running this show, they don't have the same interests in mind as you do, you know, subconsciously. Like I could wake up every day and be like, oh, I want my neighborhood to look like this, you know, but if I'm not putting in that work, you know, every day, whether it's fair or not, you know, to see my neighborhood look a certain way, the powers that be are going to make sure it look how they want it to look. And like, so anecdotally, like I just lost my grandma this year and she got me really involved in the grassroots organizing. She really passed the torch to me. She was the president of the association like before me. So I came up really watching her form and facilitate relationships with her neighbors and the community to the point where she's fighting for opportunities for our, you know, people in our neighborhood. So I came up seeing that, you know. So it's a point where we are, especially like me as a young person, like we have to form those relationships and really fight, because something that she always says, like, we gotta feel house in South Oakland, you know, it's not the greatest space, you know, it never really is, you know, in our neighborhoods, but we do a hell of a lot of stuff in that field house. Birthday parties, gender reveals, you know, historically, you know, this is a place where people in our neighborhood can go and feel, you know, like they own something. You know, and she always instilled in me, she's like, well, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it.
Right, there it is.
And it's a sad reality. You know, like if you don't use the things in your neighborhood, then somebody else will take advantage of that and make a use for it. And that's just being practical. It's like, I would like to really ignite, you know, that spark, you know, and especially in an older generation. I'm not saying that like y'all are not activated, you know, because we're activated across the city. It's just like I see the people that are my age, and I'm like,
But it's the youth that
we
brings the
could be
energy.
following it up. Facts, and that's what,
You know, one thing you said about that, I think Leilani said the same thing, is we never envision what we want this city to look like, what we want our neighborhood to look like. The first thing we got to start with is valuing our neighborhood. So we don't think twice about when somebody comes to Homewood and say, I will offer you $40,000 for a house. They don't sit there and say, $40,000, that's way more than, and they're not thinking, why did he want to buy a house in Homewood? So we don't value what we have until we wake up 5 years from now and we see the Starbucks on there and we see all of that. And so, I don't know, hopefully I'm not alone. Like Homewood is, I mean, I started out there as a kid, but I moved to East Liberty when I was about 6 years old. And East Liberty, by the way, is probably not far away from its first $1 million transaction. Because a guy, they're building some townhouses, they're all connected. And somebody asked them what you're gonna be charging, and they're saying $900,000. So it won't be long till East Liberty gets its first $1 million thing. But I've always, maybe you can help me. Do people, my community of Homewood, I've always envisioned what it could be. Because even when I was a kid, it was already, it was already, but I still have memories of it when it didn't have all those vacant lots and there were a few stores there. And so do people really, in your experience, do you run across people who really can see what they envision, hope that it could be? Because if you don't see that, then how do you work for it? How do you get energized? So I can close my eyes and see, people with their, table out front of the house playing cards or playing bones or something. I see that. And so that gives you energy to try to work to make that a reality, because I know it can be a reality. And so, I don't know what I just asked you, but if I didn't ask anything, I'm just saying, if y'all can't see it, if you can't imagine it,
How we can
then
build a
how you
legacy
gonna get
for our
there?
children and grandchildren.
You don't even know what you're working for if you can't see it. Sorry, Jackie.
I know,
Sorry.
I am really bummed out that we are in a space that really will kick us. We need to leave the space at 8. And that's like 9 minutes.
You can't make a phone call, Jackie? You can't make a phone call to the chancellor and it's okay with that?
Staff leaves, we have.
Bylaws.
Jackie told me she had all this juice at the university.
Can you send them to her?
So what I'd like to ask everybody,
Okay, cool.
so Mel, you had your hand up. Do you want to make a brief comment and then maybe?
Go ahead, Mel.
And Gabby?
I'm Mel Farha, I work with Penn Plaza. I just want to comment briefly on Penn's councils. Penn's councils are wonderful to do. They're simply a tool. They're not an answer. And if we can't make tenants councils act like unions with the ability to pull out rent strikes and then occupy the building, then it's kind of worthless. And second of all, I want us to remember our history. And I'm 77, folks. I've been around doing this shit for a long time. We made things happen when we brought the nation to a halt.
Yeah.
When tens of thousands of people were willing to go to jail, when they were in the streets every single day, when black workers in the Dodge plants in Detroit said we're shutting down the industry over racism, the civil rights movement, the anti-movement, the women's movement, whatever movement it was, that's what it takes. If we count on just electing a few good people, we're doomed already. And if we count on legal strategies are simply a tool, right? They're a tool, like my friend Jules LaBelle often says,
What we're supposed to do with the law is it accompanies the struggle. It never leads the struggle. And if all we do is count on the law to do it, you want to see a movement get kicked in the ass? Put all your money into a lawsuit. Because the movement goes away. The energy dissipates. We have to remember how powerful we were once, how powerful we can be again. And until we build a housing movement that's capable of occupying units and standing up and putting people in jail, we're not going to win.
I'm pretty sure it might have been Operation Better Block. And I saw it through the Homewood CEC Center where they actually tracked home ownership in all the homes. And it showed whether there were local owners and showed it by distance, like how far away people, who the owners were. So there's a model there that folks here can, because Darren Elevate showed it to me, John Wallace should know about it. So there's a model in terms of tracking home, like who actually owns what. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And because I've seen that document. And I've
You
seen
can do
like,
that down at the city county building when we look at the property on Leroy and find out who the property owner was. That is public information.
Okay,
We can find it.
so, folks,
We have that.
Yes.
We'll be
Yeah, no,
we'll be
I know.
squatting in a few
There's
minutes.
a lot of
We'll be
pieces.
squatting, so we gotta
there's
get
a
out
lot
of
of pieces of these three things. If any of you have thoughts you want to add, if you can email pghrights@riseup.net, pghrights@riseup.net, or you can find me on the Sociology at Pitt website. We'll work these into a document, ideas. If you're interested in helping us think about any of these three strategies or some combination, or you have some bit of information to share, like Gabby just did, about where we might look. Our team will put our heads together with all these notes and all these amazing thoughts from the week, and we will be following up. We'll also, if you have the website that we built for this week, we'll be putting resources and links, including, well, Leilani's got some great tools, including a housing strategy toolkit. And I think some examples from other places that we can borrow. So we're not starting from scratch. We've got people who came before us just locally and globally, which is really cool. And I think that's part of what we want to do. But Leilani, you have the last word.
It's not the last, it should not be the last word. I
For
just
now.
want to pick up this issue around litigation and how deadening it can be. And I have to say, I've been part of litigation where it's like that, completely deadening. But I've also been part of test case litigation that has been quite the opposite, where the litigation actually ended up creating a whole community of folks who suddenly knew way more about the right to housing than they had prior. But it was a very particular model, and it's the model that I mentioned to you before, Jackie. And it's an onerous model. I mean, because you have to create community, and the litigation has to come from the community, and it's much more difficult, but way more valuable. So I take your point, because litigation can be, if it's run by lawyers, pro bono, even like the best of the lawyers and pro bono lawyers. I'm a lawyer, so I'm talking on my kin. They can just completely alienate communities. So yeah. Just to be careful to go down the road and do it right.
Yeah, but it's hard to find those type of people in the city. That's really.
Okay, so we are going to see what we can do together